Thank you for joining me today to have this conversation about the similarities between self-development through therapy and coaching and self-development through yoga. Philippe van de Mile Martin. Yes,
Yeah, that works.
I'll do it again. Philippe van de Mile Martin is a yoga teacher in Toronto. I've been taking your classes in different yoga studios for a while. And I really enjoy your approach to yoga, which is why I asked you to come and join me on this chat. Is there anything you want to add about yourself?
Um, I think that pretty much covers it for today. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And I'm Mashad, as you know. I'm a registered psychotherapist and life coach. And I'm doing these videos because I love offering what I have learned throughout the years from professional experience and life experience and offering practical tips for moving positively and making positive shifts in your life. So, the idea for this chat came from one of the classes I had with you, where you were teaching us how to go into the half moon pose. And you broke it down into incremental steps and explained each step to us so that we could start stacking each step. And it helped me get to a point in half moon pose that I had never actually gotten to. And funnily enough, I don't know if I've been able to get to in every other class. And I realized it's because in other classes, when they're asking me to just go into the pose, I start going into it pretty quickly and start skipping steps. Whereas in your class, you're very, very deliberate in making sure that we don't do that. So that's why I wanted to us for us to really chat about that. So first of all, how do you see the similarities between therapy coaching as a self-development tool and yoga as a self-development tool?
Well, my introduction to yoga was when I really needed therapy and coaching, but I didn't know, or I didn't um face that, or I wasn't aware of it enough. And it was kind of, yeah, it was kind of the gateway into it. The teachers that I gravitated towards as a late teen, early 20s person, when I first started doing yoga, were people who were teaching exercise classes, vinyasa classes, but they were doing it with a more open mind and an approach to teaching that encouraged people in their classes to think and to feel beyond just the physical. And that's
Mm.
what really inspired me to become the teacher, the instructor that I now am after almost 10 years of doing it. Um, and I guess that in some ways that the step-by-step process and the theming way that I lead my yoga classes is mostly inspired by my main teacher. His name is JP Tamblin. He was the owner of Ahimsa Yoga Toronto
Yeah.
before that studio closed post COVID. But uh, an approach that was truly all levels that starts, therefore, with the first step, and then the second step, and then the third step, and then the fourth step, and maybe up to the 25th step. But the point is that it never starts at the 25th step because not every person is at the 25th step.
That's right.
And in order to offer as many people as possible the chance to thrive and to feel good in their body um, and to feel capable and to give themselves the feeling of uh, pride and fulfillment and expansion that is only possible if we start at the beginning. And I guess this is the whole idea of this chat.
Hmm.
Then I have to, in good conscience as an instructor, start with what some people may see as review and basics and beginner stuff, so that we may actually get to the quote unquote advanced stuff um, later. And at least in my personal experience of therapy, that's also been true. If I try to skip a step, I give myself the illusion of speed, the illusion of getting there faster. But in the end, I pretty much every single time have to go back to the basics anyway. So I may as well start at the beginning.
I started coughing. Um, that was great. and exactly what I was thinking when I was thinking about our chat. Starting at the first step, if I'm listening to you through my professional lens, means we start where we can, but in the view of moving forward. And when we start in the first step, that means we're actually starting where we're at. We know exactly where we are. We know exactly what our capability is, and we know where we're going. So we take a step towards that. And you said the 25th step. I actually have realized you can't even start at the second step. Because if you start at the second step, chances are you're skipping something really foundational.
Totally.
And what happens is that your nervous system will kick into resistance and will pull you back.
Yeah.
A few things happen there, as you said. One, you lose motivation very quickly, which is very sad because when we do the first step and we can see that we've been able to do it, we actually increase our motivation because we're increasing our success rate.
Million
So
percent. In
yeah.
fact, if one is to skip steps, they may as well skip the 24th. But I think you're right. The foundational ones, the first few in particular are, I would agree with that, are particularly important not to skip.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of moves into the topic of incremental change, which is again, um, in my world, most people come to therapy or coaching because they want to change something, or a change has happened in their lives and they want to be able to adapt to it and then thrive with it. And even in that, what happens is when we don't break it down to the simplest, most sustainable, smallest step doable that is also new, a new move, then we're going to delay the progress actually, because again, that zigzag and that kind of seesaw happens where you go fast, a little bit too fast, and then you come back. And then you have to go a little bit too fast and then come back. Whereas if you break it down and slow it down, you get to really see what's happening. And I think that's what I love about yoga and teachers like you that are self reflective, encouraging self reflection in their teaching, asking us to notice what's happening in the body in any second, and then pausing as soon as the body says, oh, not anymore. Because we know that when we pause there, then we're listening to the body, and actually the body can stabilize where it is and then take the next step after that.
Well, the thing that stuck out to me about what you just said is the difference between the body's knowledge and the part of our mind, the part of our ego that resists that knowledge. I think that uh, the body, for the most part, the body knows. The mind kind of thinks it knows, but the body knows.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's, how much strength, how much flexibility, or how much balance you might have in a yoga pose, or you know, where certain pieces of trauma might live in your body, and whether we're actually accessing them and breathing through them and identifying them for what they are, looking at reality as it is. I
Mm-hmm.
think that I think that there are perfectly good reasons why parts of us resists that. So it's not about shaming those parts or judging them or getting angry with them, but recognizing them for what they are. It's the protective mechanisms that want you to accelerate faster or get there faster because it would just be so much easier to do that. But it's
Yeah.
fantasy. It's fantasy.
Why is
And
it
while
fantasy?
I think it's fantasy because fantasy is a beautiful world where where things are, things float in the air and elves fly and whatever. I think fantasy, when I say fantasy, I think that it's what I mean by that really is that we want, I think, as creatures that avoid pain to get to a place of healing, a place of pleasure, a place of connection, a place of relief as quickly as we can. Uh, and because of that, want to skip steps because that's how we perceive, consciously or not, that we'll get there as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Um, but the reality is, and the reality is the counterpoint to fantasy, the reality is that that is simply not possible for the vast majority of the time, probably,
Hmm.
arguably, even every single time.
Hmm.
And and so if we're to courageously look at reality instead of living in fantasy, then then we'll go one step at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to translate that into how I see it, fantasy and reality. Um, I would say fantasy is our survival brain's need for certainty, for knowing. Because when we know, we can read the environment, we know what's happening, we have control over the environment, then we feel safer, then we feel more stable. And so when we go there, and we all want to stay there, but if we just stayed there, we probably would never thrive. Our species would not thrive. The other side of it, reality, I would say, is probably the conscious side, the conscious brain, which can, in a way, trick us to think we're capable of doing things or we're not. But it can also, in a way, working together, they can help us first see where we are, what we are capable of, and what we're not capable of, or where we need to improve and grow. And it can help us imagine a different place. So the fantasy land, on one level, could be the place we want to end up. The reality can tell us, no, well, we're not there. On conversely, the fantasy can give us the illusion that we're where we are not, or where we'd like to be, or where we're comfortable. We can actually, like, in very, very intelligent ways, convince ourselves that our fantasy is right here, but it's not. We're just actually avoiding discomfort. But when we put them together, what I love is that we can say, okay, I'm here. This is what's happening. This is where what I'm capable of. This is where I need support. And that's where I want to go. So how do I orient myself and take the next step intentionally towards that place, whether it's fantasy in terms of where I want to go, or fantasy that I can get there without skipping steps? This gives us a good conversation between the two parts. I think you mentioned the word conversation in one of your classes. You were saying that yoga has taught you to start having a conversation with your body, what it's allowing you to do, what it's capable of doing, what you think you can do. And that is the piece around yoga's, I think, connection to psychotherapy and coaching, is the ability to bring that self-awareness, conversation with the self-assessment, self-reflection abilities to the picture. I said a lot.
Of the what I got most from the first part of what you talked about there, the fantasy reality thing and translating it into your own language, I think is like that makes total sense to me. And I speak of in my own therapy and whatever, I think I talk about it in those terms. And I the fantasy thing that I was talking about is, of course, yes, it's a protective mechanism. It's
Yes.
survival. And so it's not bad.
Mm-mm.
I think sometimes I've been prone to think of things as good or bad, and as soon as that happens, then I'm actually slowing myself down, and I'm creating more problems for myself than I need to.
Yeah.
And so seeing the survival part, the fantasy part, the part that escapes, as just another part of me that tries to make my life better, even though it's not exactly productive long term. It's a short term bomb for the BALM bomb, not
Mm-hmm.
BOMB bomb, for the thing that is ailing me or the thing that I'm going through that's uncomfortable. So that makes total sense to me. As for the second part, the yoga and the conversation with the body, I guess that what I think is that if we agree, if we can sort of if we agree that all of our experiences, every single thing that's ever happened to you, all the good, all the bad, and everything in between, the biggest challenges and the most glorious moments are hosted in our body.
Hmm.
Um, and if we agree on that, then physical exercise of any kind, but specifically physical exercise that is based in mindfulness, which does not have to be yoga vinyasa, but often is a way to literally feel your body, as in stretches, as in strengthening exercises, as in deep breaths,
Yep.
and all of those things together is sort of a literal, obvious, well, I'm connecting with my body because I'm sweating, because I'm stretching, because I'm breathing deeply, because I'm feeling something. But so when you connect to your body in this sort of, again, base level way, and then through an instructor or through your own queries or whatever, your own intentions, you add a layer of introspection or of questioning while already connected to your body in a sort of literal way. I think that that really helps me, and I think probably others, to not accelerate that process, but to open a door to sit in it um, with less resistance, not no resistance, but maybe less resistance. Because I know for myself that when I'm feeling extremely tight and extremely boundaried in a way that does not feel particularly safe, because there's a part of me that feels under attack or in a lot of pain. And someone like a therapist or a good friend tries to sort of open that for me, it'll take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and I might not even be able to get there. But if I'm connected to my body in an environment that I deem safe, such as a yoga studio, um, and I sort of lean in slowly while connected to my body, then maybe when I next sit down with my therapist or talk to myself in these kind of productive ways, the connection to the body where all the experiences are hosted is a way to circumvent a little bit of the resistance. Does that make any
Yeah.
sense?
That made a lot of sense. You said so many good things that I'm gonna just maybe even say some of them, uh, so that we have them in point form in a way. So the connection to the body, what it does is it gives you real time information, not only about physical self, like the muscles and the heartbeat and all of that, but also maybe in ways showing us why we're tight or reminding us how that connects to maybe an earlier experience. And in some ways, how earlier experiences or different experiences, especially adverse ones, can shape the way we respond to discomfort in the moment. Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely. Okay, cool. Number two, what I love about it is that when you are learning about that in the moment while you're physically active, what happens is then the learning or the discovery or the realization becomes embodied as well. What does that mean? That you're simultaneously seeing it cognitively and experiencing it on a physical level. So the next time your body does the crunching or whatever is coming up as a discomfort, now you have a different point of view of it. Maybe now you have a different understanding of it. Now you can make sense of it differently. And what I love about the way you teach yoga in terms of stacking is that when you hit there, you ask us to pause. Because that pause, that 1 second pause, it allows me to become able to witness what's happening and then do what it needs from me in order to keep moving. Because I know where I want to go. But if I skip this step, I'm going to fall, especially in the balance poses, right? Even in real life. Now when my body starts tightening up, when I start breathing shallow, as soon as I notice it, I actually pause and go, whoa, what's happening? What just happened? That alone calms me down and it allows me to make a different move versus what if I had never known what this means. I would be on autopilot and doing the thing I've always done.
But the pause thing that you mentioned, I don't know if I had said that just now. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that I think that that's a really, really great point. And it's actually fascinating for me as the instructor who's doing it sort of intuitively to hear the impact that that has for you because it makes total sense. It's the body and the mind together recognizing, okay, this is step one. Okay, this is step two.
Yeah.
Okay, this is step three.
Yeah.
Oh no, now I'm back to square one because I fell. Okay, this is step one, right? I paused because oh yeah, that's it. And then step two, and then three, and then okay, let's try four. And these
Or
even if
maybe not today.
or maybe not today.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally. But the point is wherever the final step of the day is not the final step of your life. It's just the final step of the day. And that's more than enough. And that even just one small step, if grounded and mindful, is excellent and more than a lot of people are doing. And that but this the idea of the pause is interesting because even if it's 1 second in the context of a yoga class, obviously it might be more than 1 second in the context of a session with a therapist, but even if it's 1 second in a yoga class, it's an opportunity for us to register the step and seeing it for what it is.
Yeah. 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 And what I was learning about that is that when we pause, what happens is we tap into long-term memory.
Interesting.
Whereas the automatic short-term memory is really doesn't get activated until we pause. So in that moment, when I'm pausing and stopping at that midway place before I move my arm up in half moon, and that's where I stop, then I learn that this is where I can come to in terms of long-term memory. So next time when I start, I could probably skip a couple of steps because that's my new resting place.
Right.
Whereas if I
But it's
don't
not
pause,
skipping. It's not
it's
skipping.
not skipping. No, no,
Sorry,
no. It's not. That's
it's
your
not.
first step, as you said.
It's
Yeah,
it's
you're right.
the first few steps are not skipped at any of the times. It's just that they're faster to access. So it feels
Yes,
as though it feels as though the fourth step is your new first step, but you're never actually skipping the first three. It's just that they happen so much faster and with less need for constant grounding within them. That and I mean at least that's how I feel about it because I again in the context of translating this conversation into bigger picture things as opposed to just yoga poses. I sometimes I'm just so humbled when I get triggered or I'm faced with profound discomfort to what extent I go back to square one where I
yeah,
was, at the beginning of my therapy journey 10 whatever years ago. And it's just that the the steps, the first however many steps that lead me to the current first step that journey happens not instantaneously, but quite quickly. But I still have to travel it.
that's right. And because it's been registered into your long-term memory, because it's been registered now as part of the programming, you don't need to consciously think about it. Thank you so much for catching that, Philip, because it's so foundational. Because the idea is not that you're just going to get to the fourth step and now that's going to be your new first step. The idea is understanding what steps it took to get to four. So when life throws us a curveball and we're right back to the first step again, we now have a map. We have an inner map. Oh, so this is where I start today. Okay. And then I know in my mind I can get to the fourth step, but today I need to take it slower. Or today we're just going to stay here and figure out what's showing up here that needs our attention.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I say to my therapist that I hate the most when I get extremely frustrated is I can't believe we are here again. And he, recently he said something to me along the lines of, but we're not.
Yeah.
We start here again, but the ability that you have to see the bigger picture and to travel through it is not the same
Yeah.
as it was 10 years ago. Anyway, I'm just kind of
That's
saying the
beautiful.
same thing in a different way, but
That is
um,
beautiful. Yeah. So we're not back where we were. That's just actually an impossibility. Because once you've been somewhere and you have processed some of the aspects, you're never really back there. It's an illusion, number one, or it needs us to take another look at it. There was maybe bits we missed last time. And we always come back to it with everything we've learned along the way until now. So we have all of that we carry with us, and it's all included. And then we transcend again from that moment. So I love the way your therapist mentioned it. We're just starting here today. For whatever reason, we're just going to trust it. And I always trust the intelligence of the body. So if we're there, there's probably a reason. Let's check it out. Or if we're there, maybe it's because now we get to apply everything we learned back to that original moment and then transcend from it again. Okay, so let's talk about stacking, because stacking, incremental change, stacking habits, they're interchangeable both in yoga and self-development, in therapy and coaching. When I do the stacking method in your class, what happens to me is that I can actually move beyond what I thought I could do. And that mostly has to do with the fact that you have taught us that to pause whenever the body starts to feel unstable. So I start paying attention to that. I pause there, I breathe, and then I decide if I'm ready for the next step, and then I move on. And because I'm doing that, I'm never skipping a step, as we were talking about it, and putting my body in a position that is going to now kick into resistance, and I'm going to fall or not. But how would you describe the stacking method from your point of view and the way you teach yoga?
Well, so first of all, and this is not, take this with a very large grain of salt. I'm going to use the word approach as opposed to method, in the sense that
Okay.
a method for me personally, and this might just be semantics, is something that is ironclad and
Yes.
finite, whereas
Yes.
approach offers for me, and just for me, a little bit more freedom and malleability. When it comes to this stacking approach and just sort of generally the way that I teach, um, I find that in the people who very obviously listen to these kinds of instructions and practice them as they are meant to be practiced, in my view, um, get, to your point, to the final expression of shapes faster, stronger, and more with more stability. Whereas, and this happens in every single class, the individuals who don't, whether that's because their ego's in the way and they don't want to do it my way, or whether they're not really listening, or whether their body is and their mind are not really connected, the people who try to skip steps always fall first. And it's plain as day when I look at it from the seat of the instructor, but I can appreciate how in the moment for someone that might not register as what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the stacking approach, this particular pose, half moon pose, a balanced shape that stacks the pelvis and the shoulders and the arms. Um, every single step along the way feels as though if it is skipped, the chances of falling increase significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we start with the absolute base, so in the case of half moon pose, that would be the foot on the floor and the hand that is probably on a yoga block or on the floor. If you start with the foundation, you really feel that. And then you go up the leg and up the arm and into the pelvis. And then as the pelvis opens towards the side, the back foot that's in the air will start to float back. And so we have to make sure that that back foot stays in center so that we stay balanced. And that's usually a big part of the way that people follow that pose. But then when you stop there and you feel how stable you are in that place, then all of a sudden, as you start to add what I think is the hardest part is opening the shoulder to the side to stack the shoulders and really squaring the chest to the side wall as opposed to the floor. The back foot will start to sway back, but because we stopped in the first place and the body registered what that feels like, the chances are that you're going to keep registering that and stabilizing with that are so much higher than if
Yeah.
you skipped that step. And by the time you take the top hand up towards the ceiling and the shoulders are in fact stacked, and then the wrist is on top of the shoulders, on top of the shoulders, on top of the wrist, creating this straight line that's perpendicular to the floor, and the back leg is in line with the seat, and the pelvis is open. And if the body would be between two panes of glass, neither hand or shoulder or hip or foot would touch either of them because it's all completely stacked. In all likelihood, that would not happen uh, if someone doesn't take it one small step at a time. And the
Mm.
difference between maybe the beginner and the expert in this scenario is that the more advanced person, to not use the word expert, the more advanced person, the person who is, or rather the person who has done it more times or for
Yeah.
longer, to go back to sort of what you were talking about, the person who has been through this kind of process more times slash longer period of time will likely be able to get there faster, not because they're skipping steps, but because they've been through the steps more times.
Hmm.
And so the steps are the exact same, whether it's your first time or whether it's your millionth time. It's just that probably if you're doing it for the first time, you're going to need more time per step to register them. Whereas if it's your millionth time, the steps might happen in milliseconds, but they're still happening. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's, I feel it feels kind of hard to explain. Maybe this is where you'd put your little video.
My
Um,
little drawing. Yeah.
well, just so that people who don't do yoga can know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. The things that stand out for me in terms of my lens. First of all, I love the replacement of approach instead of method, because you're right. When you think method feels like it's something that has been pre-explained and you're either doing it or not doing it.
It's like a
Whereas
recipe. It's
it's
like
like a recipe.
it's like when I make a cake. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. When I make
Please.
a cake, if I don't follow the recipe to the
Yeah.
letter, then the cake is not going to be as good.
Nope.
And that's baking.
Yeah.
It's very finite.
Yeah.
Um, Follow the recipe, and then you'll get the product. And this is, and I use the word product specifically because the world we live in, this standardized testing capitalistic world that we live in, is obsessed with the idea of the recipe. If you only do it this way, you will get what you want. That is a method. And
Yeah.
again, like there's some people in the world right now, especially that will say things like, only I can fix it.
Hmm.
You brought up the word certainty earlier
Hmm.
today.
Yeah.
And I think that the illusion of certainty and the profound unconscious need we have for it, especially when things are difficult, which is what's happening right now in the world, I think,
Yeah.
leads us to follow dangerous paths because the people who are selling you that dream know what they're doing.
Yes.
They know that we crave that certainty. And so when you're making your cake, follow the recipe because that cake's going to be amazing. But when it comes to the work that we're talking about,
Finding your way. Yeah.
yes, and sometimes as an instructor, I forget, and I'll call myself out on this a little bit. I forget that my approach is my approach, and it may not work exactly the same way for every single person. And when I forget that and I instruct it as though I know it, and if you just follow my thing, then you'll get there. And I don't keep a door open for the fact that it might not be exactly that for every single person, and that our way towards it might look similar but not exactly be the same, i.e., approach versus method.
Yeah.
I think is not only better for me as an instructor, but is better for everybody who's in my my class.
Absolutely. I love that. I 100% agree with you. There are ways in which method, some things, uh, need it, but finding our way through a yoga pose, finding our way through life transitions, changes, finding our way in life in general. There are some foundational realities and truths, but otherwise it's an approach. So what you're doing is you're saying, hey, stacking approach says don't skip a step, pause, pay attention, and do it. But then it's not telling you how to do it when you get there. You get to choose if you're going to do 5 steps today, 1 step tomorrow, or if your approach takes you over here and my approach takes me over there. So I really love the idea of approach for that, number one. You're absolutely right. Method appeals to our survival brain that wants to keep us safe in the known, whereas approach allows curiosity to open up and for us to decide if this is where I want to go. It gives us choice, it gives us agency. And so in yoga class, actually, you're constantly saying, this is my approach. You do with it what you need. You check in with your body. And our body has that certainty of what it's ready for and what it's not if we actually start listening to it. And then the approach allows us to look beyond that. And thank you for bringing that in the end, because it's a really important place for us to even think about ending this talk, because yes, everything we're talking about is some practical ways we have learned, collectively, and me in my world, you in your world, of how to make sustainable change happen. But it doesn't mean that we know how everybody has to do it. We're offering an approach. If it appeals to someone, they get to try it out. We've been able to today break it down into its incremental steps. We've been able to offer some ways of paying attention to what to pay attention to, what to maybe try out, but we're not telling them how to do it, which would be a method. And thank you so much. I think that's it for me, unless you have some final thoughts you want to add. I can see your eyes going up, so please.
No, no, it's just fascinating. Yeah. I yeah, thank you. This was nice.